Right now, somewhere in the world, a war is being fought. Maybe it's over oil, land, or religion. But centuries ago, the world's most brutal empires fought, killed, and smuggled for something that's sitting right inside your kitchen cabinet. A simple leaf. You probably think of tea as a cozy bedtime ritual or a quiet afternoon drink. It isn't. Tea is the most politically explosive beverage in human history. It created global trade routes, funded massive corporate empires, sparked bloody revolutions, and tore down ancient dynasties. It is quite literally the liquid that shaped the modern world. The global obsession started with a freak accident thousands of years ago. The year was 2737 BC. The place was ancient China. Emperor Shennong, a ruler obsessed with hygiene and science, was resting under a wild tea tree. His servants were boiling a pot of drinking water nearby. A stray breeze caught the branches above, sending a few leaves drifting down directly into the bubbling pot. The water turned a deep, rich amber. Intrigued by the aroma, the emperor took a sip. He felt an immediate wave of alertness and refreshment wash over him. He called it cha. For centuries, this bitter brew remained a closely guarded secret, used mostly by Buddhist monks to stay awake during grueling, hours-long meditation sessions. But good secrets never stay buried. By the time the Tang dynasty took power in the 7th century, tea evolved from a bitter medicine into a massive cultural phenomenon. It became the ultimate status symbol. If you were anyone in Chinese high society, you didn't just drink tea, you masterfully prepared it, wrote poetry about it, and used it to flaunt your wealth. Demand skyrocketed so fast that the Chinese government realized they were sitting on a gold mine. They turned the tea trade into a massive state-run monopoly. The leaves became so stable and universally desired that people stopped using gold and silver to buy goods. Instead, they used pressed bricks of dried tea leaves. You could literally buy a horse, pay your taxes, or purchase a house using nothing but blocks of compressed tea. For nearly 1,000 years, China held a total, airtight monopoly on the global tea supply. If you wanted the leaf, you had to play by China's rules. But European traders were sailing across the globe, looking for anything they could buy cheap and sell high. The Dutch were the first Europeans to get their hands on a commercial shipment of Chinese tea in 1610. At first, Europe didn't know what to make of it. Doctors argued over whether it was a miraculous cure-all or a literal poison. It was incredibly expensive, meaning only the wealthiest aristocrats could afford to try it. The real turning point for the Western world happened in 1662, thanks to a young Portuguese princess named Catherine of Braganza. She packed her bags to marry King Charles II of England, bringing a massive dowry of gold, precious gems, and a personal crate of loose-leaf Chinese tea. At the time, the English court drank ale and wine all day long. Catherine shocked the royals by bypassing the alcohol and regularly demanding a hot cup of tea. Because she was the queen, every noble woman in England immediately wanted to copy her. Drinking tea became the ultimate sign of sophistication, luxury, and supreme wealth. The British East India Company, a massive corporate entity with its own private army, saw a massive business opportunity. They started shipping boatloads of tea into London. If you're enjoying learning how this crazy trade war unfolded, take a quick second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with a friend who loves history. The problem was the British government taxed tea at an outrageous 119%. This absurd tax rate did not stop people from drinking it. It just created a massive, violent underground economy. A shadow network of heavily armed smuggling rings took over the English coast. These weren't petty thieves. They were highly organized criminal syndicates. They smuggled tea into the country on fast, dark ships, hid the crates in church crypts, and fought brutal, bloody gunfights with government agents in the middle of the night. To stretch their massive profits, these smugglers started cutting the real tea leaves with cheap fillers. They mixed in ash tree leaves, licorice, and even dried sheep dung to make the batches look bigger. To get the color just right, they added highly toxic chemicals like copper carbonate and lead. Millions of British citizens were knowingly drinking poisoned counterfeit tea every single day just to get their caffeine fix. Eventually, the British government realized they were losing the war against the smugglers. They slashed the tea tax, making the drink safe, legal and cheap enough for the working class. But across the Atlantic Ocean, the British government made a fatal mistake. They decided to force their American colonies to pay a tax on tea imported by the British East India Company, while simultaneously giving the company a monopoly that undercut local colonial merchants. The American colonists were absolutely furious. They didn't see it as a minor tax on a morning drink. They saw it as an act of absolute tyranny. On a cold December night in 1773, a group of colonists disguised themselves, boarded 3 British merchant ships docked in Boston Harbor, and smashed open 342 massive crates of tea. They dumped over 90,000 pounds of loose leaves directly into the ocean. The modern equivalent of that ruined cargo is worth over $1 million. This single act of corporate sabotage pushed the British Empire over the edge. They responded with brutal military crackdowns, closing the harbor and stripping the colony of its self-governance. The escalation triggered the American Revolutionary War. A dispute over tea taxes ended up fracturing the world's greatest empire and giving birth to the United States of America. While Britain was busy losing its American colonies, its citizens back home were developing an unbreakable addiction to the drink. By the early 1800s, the average English factory worker was consuming tea multiple times a day. Britain desperately needed millions of pounds of tea every single year, but China still held the monopoly, and the Chinese emperors were entirely uninterested in British goods. The Qing dynasty emperor famously told the British king that China possessed all things in prolific abundance and had absolutely no use for manufactures from British barbarians. China would only accept one thing in exchange for their precious tea: pure silver. This created a catastrophic economic crisis for Britain. Silver was draining out of the British treasury at an alarming, unsustainable rate, threatening to bankrupt the empire just to keep up with the nation's afternoon tea habit. The British East India Company needed a solution, and they found a deeply sinister one. They started growing opium, a highly addictive narcotic, in British-controlled India. They then smuggled millions of pounds of opium directly into China through illegal black market networks. The plan worked perfectly. Within a few decades, millions of Chinese citizens became profoundly addicted to opium. The economic tables completely turned. Silver stopped flowing out of Britain and started pouring back into British hands as Chinese citizens spent everything they had on the drug. The Chinese government watched in horror as their society fractured under the weight of addiction. In 1839, a high-ranking Chinese official decided enough was enough. He seized and destroyed over 2 million pounds of British opium stored in Canton. Britain's response was swift and brutal. They didn't apologize for flooding China with narcotics. Instead, they sent the world's most powerful steam-powered warships to attack the Chinese coast, sparking the First Opium War. The British military absolutely decimated the Chinese forces, forcing the Qing dynasty to sign a humiliating treaty. China was forced to pay millions in silver reparations, hand over the island of Hong Kong to British control, and open up their ports to free trade. Even though Britain won the war, they knew their tea supply chain was still incredibly fragile. They realized that relying entirely on China for the world's favorite leaf was a massive geopolitical risk. They needed a way to grow tea inside their own empire, specifically in India. But they had no idea how to actually manufacture it. The complex drying, fermenting, and roasting processes were still a heavily guarded state secret known only to Chinese masters. To break the monopoly once and for all, the British turned to industrial espionage. They hired a Scottish botanist named Robert Fortune for a highly dangerous undercover mission. In 1848, Fortune shaved his head, wore a fake long braid, dressed in traditional silk robes, and adopted a disguise as a wealthy nobleman from a distant province. He sneaked past the restricted coastal ports and traveled deep into the forbidden interior of China, visiting secret tea-growing regions where foreigners were strictly banned on pain of death. Fortune successfully mapped out the factories, noted the precise soil conditions, and learned the intricate chemical processing secrets. Most importantly, he stole over 20,000 viable tea plants and thousands of seeds, smuggling them out of China inside specially designed glass cases. He brought the stolen plants, along with a team of experienced Chinese tea masters, directly to the Indian region of Assam. The corporate theft worked flawlessly. Within a few decades, British-run plantations in India were producing massive quantities of high-quality tea, completely breaking China's millennial-old monopoly. The theft devastated the Chinese economy, contributing to a century of political instability and decline for the Qing dynasty. The next time you boil water and drop a simple tea bag into your mug, take a close look at it. You aren't just drinking a beverage. You are tasting the exact catalyst that built global corporate superpowers, sparked the American Revolution, fueled the opium trade, and drove the greatest act of industrial theft the world has ever seen. Tea didn't just change history, it built the world you live in today.